If I had to think throughout all my studies and all my experiences with the worlds of personal development, high performance, productivity, etc., if I had to pick one thing that I think is the most important, it's hard to pick the most important, but if I had to pick one thing that is in contention for the most important thing I've ever learned, it would be this. But before I get there, if you're new here, my name is Jorge Calaos. I'm a business lawyer based in Florida, specializing in high stakes lawsuits. And in this channel, we explore the principles and the strategies to help us live more productive, meaningful, and fulfilling lives. So what is that number one thing? Well, that number one thing was actually something I found in the second book I ever read. The first book I ever read as an adult nonfiction for personal development purposes was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The second book I ever read was this one right here called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. Now, this book completely changed my life. And to understand its message, it's nice to understand the background and the context from which Maxwell Maltz wrote this book. Maxwell Maltz, as you can see from the cover of this book, is an MD. He's a doctor, and specifically he was a plastic surgeon. And what he found was that when he would perform plastic surgery on his patients, some patients after the plastic surgery adopted a completely new set of beliefs, and some patients after the plastic surgery kept the old beliefs that they had before the plastic surgery. Now, what do I mean by this? By this, I mean if you have a scar on your face and you adopt the self-image of someone who has that scar on their face, what he noticed is that there were two kinds of patients. Patients who, after he removed the scar that was on their face, adopted a completely new personality and a completely new self-image, and patients who, after he removed their scar on their face, they still had that self-image of somebody who had a scar on their face. And so that prompted him to study and learn more about the concept of self-image. And then he wrote this book, which is essentially a collection of his findings. And one of the most important findings that he found is that our self-images are servo mechanisms. Now, what is that? What is a servo mechanism? A great way to understand what a servo mechanism is to think of a missile. When you shoot a missile, let's say the missile starts here, this is where it's being released from, and you want it to go here. This is the target point. So you have a start point and an end point. And when you shoot a missile, the missile is a servo mechanism in that it serves itself. In other words, it doesn't just go straight like that to its end point. It actually starts to go there, and then it deviates a little bit, and then it corrects itself. And then it deviates a little bit, then it corrects itself. And it goes like that all the way here. It looks like a straight line, but it's actually constantly correcting itself to get to its end point. Now, what does that have to do with our self-images? Our self-images course correct in the same way. For our self-images, our self-image is the end point. In other words, we have a self-image of who we believe we are, and all our thoughts and all our actions are constantly course correcting to keep us aligned and in congruence with that self-image. Now, what does that mean for us? That means that if we have a crappy self-image, no matter how hard we try, we're never going to be able to act and think in a different direction because our servo mechanism will constantly course correct us to our old, or in this case, current self-image. I got a little bit ahead of myself there because the point of this is to understand that until we transform our current self-image into an old self-image and adopt a new self-image for our servo mechanism to constantly course correct itself towards that new self-image, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to create any kind of change in our lives. In other words, no matter how hard we try, for example, to be a disciplined person and to exercise discipline, if we see ourselves as an undisciplined person, no matter how hard we try to exercise discipline, our servo mechanism will correct us, so we will act in congruence with the self-image that we are undisciplined people. And that applies to pretty much any area of our lives, whether that's discipline or health or career or entrepreneurship or relationships. We will always act in congruence with our self-image. Now, there's a caveat to this. On the one hand, you have the fact that we always act in congruence with our self-image, and on the other hand, we have the fact that our brains and our subconscious minds are constantly looking at the behaviors that we undertake to determine what kind of processes it should be running. So in other words, we always act in congruence with our self-image, but our self-image is largely formed based on our actions. And so it kind of creates a snowball effect, and it can be a snowball effect that is positive or a snowball effect that is negative. Usually when you don't understand that this is how it works, the snowball effect is going to be negative, but when you do understand that this is how it works, you can manipulate the process so that the snowball effect is positive. So what's an example of a negative snowball effect? A negative snowball effect is you have the self-image of someone who, let's say, is an undisciplined person, and you try to exercise discipline, but your self-image keeps you in congruence with the idea that you are an undisciplined person, and so you inevitably fail to act in a disciplined manner, and then you beat yourself up, and then you go a long time not acting in a disciplined manner and behaving in undisciplined behavior, which reinforces that negative self-image. So then when you try again, it's going to be even harder to succeed. Now, what's an example of a positive snowball effect? Let's stick with somewhat of a same example. If you have the self-image of, hey, I am an undisciplined person, you can, if you understand that that is your self-image and that that is how you view yourself, you can start to act day to day, little by little. You can start to exercise more and more discipline, and that will be met with resistance from your self-image. But when you go at it day after day after day after day, now all of a sudden you're fighting back against that self-image, which, if you understand that this is how your self-image could be holding you back, it's easier to push through and fight back against the power of that self-image. And so when you do it little by little by little by little, you start chipping away little by little by little by little, and then eventually your subconscious mind has proved that, wait a second, maybe I'm not an undisciplined person, maybe I'm actually a little bit disciplined. And now all of a sudden your self-image has shifted because, number one, you understood the power of your self-image, and number two, you took deliberate and consistent action to give your subconscious mind proof that that self-image is not totally accurate. And so now you've made your self-image a little bit more positive, and so now it's a little bit more easier to be a disciplined person and to exercise discipline. And now you keep going at it and at it and at it and at it and at it, and now your self-image shifts even more, and now it's easier, and that's the positive snowball effect. Now, this completely changed my life because I realized in my life how often I was behaving in certain ways just because that's who I thought I was. And I realized, who told me that that's who I was? Why did I conclude that I was this sort of person? What if I just say I'm this sort of person and then start acting in congruence with that sort of person? Yeah, it'll be hard at first because I've had the self-image for my entire life, but once I start chipping away at it, it becomes easier and easier and easier and easier, and eventually you end up reinventing yourself. And so that's the mindset shift that changed everything for me, is that if I am having trouble engaging in certain kinds of behavior or being a certain kind of person, I have to, number one, understand, okay, who do I believe I am? Number two, question why I believe I am that person and question the validity of that conclusion. And number three, if I don't like that current self-image, adopt a new self-image and then start giving that new self-image proof. And over time, the new self-image will get stronger and the old self-image will get weaker. Now, if you enjoyed that, please join the community, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment letting me know what you liked and what you want to see more of. And if you want to see a somewhat related video, you can check out this video that I made about 10 live lessons that I wish I knew when I was 18. And if you want even more resources, you can check out the link in the description box below that will take you to my website, where you can download your free copy of the 5-step morning routine, a quick start guide to high performance and peace of mind. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.